Welcome to today's episode of Financial Fluency. Today I have Sabrina Must with me, who is a blogger and the author of Must Girls Love. Thank you for joining me, Sabrina.
Thank you for having me. I haven't sat down for a podcast interview in a couple months, and I always really enjoy them. It's always amazing conversations. So thank you.
Yeah. Sure. I love podcasts too. Actually, you know what my favorite thing about podcasts is?
What?
Is there's somebody that you know and you see them around, but you don't really know their story. And then you get on a podcast and it's such a nice, intimate platform. You know, most people listen with their headphones in or like while you're driving or running or doing something. And it always feels like a nice one-on-one conversation, even though you're just listening to it.
For sure.
Yeah. So I, this morning, downloaded your memoir, Must Girls Love, and started reading it.
Yeah.
And was instantly struck by how incredibly open you are about very difficult things.
Yeah, it's I always, even just when you told me that a few minutes ago, I always kind of apologize from the beginning because it's a very intense book. I did not hold back. I was very young when I wrote it, and it was just kind of, I took the mindset of like, if I'm going to tell this story, I'm going to tell it all in. Just give it to you. And I want it to be a real experience of this is what really goes on in a family, especially as a 22-year-old. This is how it can like rock your world. Disrupt a lot. But there's, and a lot of it is, it wasn't just about me, and that's kind of the connection. It's a lot about family, all the history and the secrets and the, so. Yeah.
So did you were 22 when you wrote this?
Mm-hmm.
When was that? How long ago?
I'm 31 now. So,
okay.
My sister passed away. I was just about to turn 22, a few weeks shy of 22. So it's 9.5 years. I wrote the book. Yeah, I wrote it for pretty consistently for about a year, took a couple of months off, and then finished it up in a few more months. And then, under 2 years since my sister died, that was kind of when I had it printed and started distributing it. So, yeah, it's been a while, but.
That's impressive as a 22-year-old to write a memoir like this and get it done and get it out.
Yeah, I'm very much if I want to get something done or if I'm set on something, I will just bulldoze through it. And it was, in a way, it helped me process what was going on because I could put my energy somewhere. And as much as it was very intense writing it, there was an outlet, a creative outlet. So I just didn't feel like I was just wallowing in nothing, if that makes sense. But yes, it was very tough. It was very tough. I mean, it was the hardest year of my life.
Yeah. Do you want to share a bit about the book so that the listeners know?
Yeah. So, you can go on and you can read an excerpt and whatnot, but it's a lot. When I was, as I said, a couple weeks before my sister, before I turned 22, I was finishing up college. My sister committed suicide in an abusive marriage. Just felt like there was no way out. Pretty much just made a really shitty decision. I think in a lot of ways, it was a cry for help. That was honestly, it would have been as shocking if she told me that she was moving to Mars. I just was not in the equation at all. Never thought about it as an option. I'm the youngest of 4 girls. So the whole book pretty much, it traces family history. It starts from my aunt that I never met. She drowned when she was 6 years old, and the turmoil that caused within my mom's side, my mom's family. And it just kind of, it pinpoints all the major events of Maya growing up and us as a family and me growing up and then dying. And it basically outlines my whole year after her death. And investigating it, trying to figure out if she was murdered, investigator, it goes really deep. This is what happens when someone commits suicide. Obviously, different situations in every family and every situation is different. But, I wanted readers to really see a very clear, transparent, this is my experience. Can you relate to it in any way? And then be more sensitive to other people's story or even your own.
Mm-hmm.
That was always the intention.
Well, I definitely related to it as soon as I started reading it. I have an uncle I never met because he killed himself in college. He was a year ahead of my mom, who was at the same college. And yeah, and I had a similar thing where I didn't know he existed till I was 12 and was looking at family photos and was like, wait a minute, who's this fifth child with, my aunts and uncles and my mom? And I'm not sure my mom even realized that they had not spoken about him since I'd been born.
That's very interesting. I think it happens a lot. I mean, I think that my family, the way that the book starts, right, is that they didn't speak about Debbie in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I always heard about her from my mom.
Wow.
My mom was open, and I mean, I didn't really know that much. I just knew that she was a sweet girl and this and that. She was 6 years old, My mom was 6 years old when she died, but it was never a secret for me. It was more interesting to see if you keep it a secret, you don't talk about it, if you don't talk about it as a family, if you're not grieving, if you're not truly grieving and like really going through the steps, this is what could happen. And it just became like, my uncle still struggles with it. He was there when she drowned. So, there's a lot of baggage that comes with these kind of experiences of any kind of loss. Suicide kind of is in its own like category a lot of times. The way that I see it, I've had a lot of people die in my life, and like anytime it's a suicide, it just presents a lot of unanswers. But yes, it's the talking about it, and that's what I wanted this book to be. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. How can it become? I don't want suicide to become the norm, but I want being open and vulnerable to be the norm. If that makes sense in any situation. So.
Mm-hmm. But I think, like with most other things, being able to talk about it and acknowledge its existence and possibility allows people to ask for help too when they need it. If they feel like they're the only one who's ever felt this way and they're completely isolated and alone, they're less likely to reach out for help. Yeah.
People get very humiliated by certain thoughts that they have and, feelings and experiences. And as soon as you realize that someone else or 100 other people or 1 million other people have the same experience, it makes you feel understood. And from that understanding, you're like, there's a sense of relief. And it can be any issue. It can be, I'm struggling with anxiety attacks, or I have an abusive father, or my mom's an alcoholic, or I struggle with alcoholism, or my sister killed herself. I mean, whatever the issue, everyone has their shit. So how can you make people feel understood? And I mean, that's why I'm very open in my writing, is just because I think that she's grunting, she won't stop playing.
What's the dog's name?
This is Monkey. And I already took her on a roller skate today. I went rollerblading around the neighborhood, and she's still like just needs so much exercise.
Hey, Monkey. So, you help other people to write and tell their stories too, as well, don't you? Is that right?
Yeah, sometimes I actually, something I have on my to-do list is, I'll have people reach out and be like, hey, I'm working on, my autobiography or my memoir, and I'll help them, and I'll kind of, whether it's editing and helping direct them a little bit, it can take shape in many different ways. But for whatever reason, and I think a lot of it is when you're open, then other people feel that they can be open with you. And I get people messaging me, emailing me all the time. And at the end of their email being like, I've never told anyone this. Because it's certain things are shameful, or they're presented shameful from a young age. But yeah, sometimes that's something definitely I want to incorporate more in my blog as I build it. And allowing others to like have a platform for their voice, to share their stories, because my story, the certain, experiences I have might not resonate with every reader. And so someone else that reads my blog and wants to share and have a platform for their voice, that might resonate with the next person. So yeah, that's sometimes it's more what I work with, like one-on-one with people, that I want to
Mhm.
Obviously with it.
Well, that makes sense. So in terms of how your business is set up financially, since this is a financial podcast, how is your income mainly from being an author?
No.
No.
So I've been doing work with businesses for a decade, you know, and at first it was like a friend's company or a friend of a friend, or, you know, this person locally back in Michigan, from Michigan, and then I just I established it a little bit more as like an LLC. And so all my income comes from a company I created called Write Less Bad. And it's not actually, well, I like to think that I'm teaching businesses how to write better. But it's just a funny, you know, title that I gave a business. But so say you have a startup and you need help with your pitch deck or investor proposal or a website or app or whatever it is. Anytime that you're using content, written content, I come in and help you draft it. You send me your draft and I fix it up and polish it and make it kind of represent what your brand and message is, and make it engaging. So I have clients all over, you know, where, you know, a couple are in San Diego, you know, a few in Michigan, New York, San Francisco, Seattle, Hong Kong, Italy, like it's all, but I've been focusing a lot on my blog lately. I kind of neglected Write Less Bad, but yes, that's where, so I make a living doing that, with the intention right now that I'm going to keep building up my blog, that I'll be able to monetize it more than I already have. So.
Okay, cool. Does your blog focus on fiction or memoir?
So it's definitely, you know, the voice of like memoir, where it's personal experience. Almost everything I wrote, my degrees are in creative nonfiction. And it can be anything like my Thursday, I post on Tuesday and Thursday. So my Thursday post was my travel guide for Saeli to Mexico. I did a trip down to Mexico a few weeks ago, and, you know, featured a bunch of hotels on my blog, and, you know, that hosted me, and, you know, just giving, you know, I travel a lot, but it doesn't just have to be travel. It could be a piece about, I wrote this piece, you know, that was decently heavy, about that we don't teach people how to grieve. It could be something that, you know, related to my sister and grief in general. It could be something about love and dating, that, you know, being more open, or whether it's my experience or piggybacking off of something that I've heard someone talk about and being like, yeah, I want to discuss this. And again, just like I am with my book, I'm pretty transparent. I'm really open in my writing. So it covers a lot of different topics, but I've been really focusing on the travel aspects right now. While I'm in Wyoming at my friend's house, as I said, you know, we're going around to a bunch of different restaurants and all the, you know, the adventure hikes and whatnot, so I can include that in the big blog post for Jackson Hole.
Oh, cool. Do you submit travel stuff to other like travel publications at all?
Yeah, sometimes I used to submit more to certain publications like Elephant Journal or Thought Catalog, or you know, and get things published a decent amount. But to be really transparent, those publications, and I actually have a blog post that I wrote, but I'm just like hesitant to post it right now. I'm just like not ready yet. But they don't pay you, and it's, you know, and there is, like, that's why I have to run Write Less Bad to make money right now, because, you know, I think that people can say, oh, I was in Huffington Post, or oh, I was published on this, and they're like pretty much like, we're like their slave laborers. You know, we put all that content out, and in theory you're getting a lot of exposure, but it really doesn't translate to as much as you think. It's something that I've been really thinking about lately. But yeah, I'm actually trying to connect through a business connection with like Travel and Leisure, or, you know.
Yeah, or like those airline magazines. And yeah, I've kind of looked at that. I do blog for Huffington Post and Thrive Post, but I kind of treat that as my blog. You know, like I feature people who come on my podcast because I figure, well, we'll get backlinks and more people might see it that way. But it is true. Most of those places don't pay. There are very few places that pay for content these days.
You know, it's just, I think it's with you publish on those sites and you do all the work and it becomes like a full-time job submitting. I don't think people realize how much effort it really takes to break into certain publications. But you do it with the hope that it's going to help you monetize your writing. And sometimes it does, and very often it doesn't, and you can get down on yourself. So there's that balance between, okay, how can I, using what I love to do and what I'm good at, how can I make money to support my other venture until that starts to make money? And it's always that balance between, I love writing Write Less Bad. I love working with my clients. Like I'm learning a lot about different industries. I mean, I could sit down and edit material all day long, and it's like solving math problems for people. Oh, mathematician loves it, really. It's super nerdy, but it's always, because there is that financial aspect. It's real life. You have to make a living, and at least with my last few travel trips, being put up with by hotels and hosted at restaurants, it definitely helps. It at least feels like it's somewhat of an even exchange with all the work I put in on my blog. So it's helpful. But
and did your blog get a significant amount of traffic for those travel places?
I get 4,000 or 5,000 views. I don't know. I'm not super good on keeping up with the Google Analytics, but it fluctuates. It depends. I do get, I have a decent amount of a following on Instagram and Facebook, and a lot of people look at my stuff on those mediums. I just in the past couple of months, I've taken a little bit more of a time investment into certain things on my website and my blog. I'm still learning, but yeah, I mean, I know that people are reading the content. It's just it's a business. It's learning, and it's always figuring out and finding out new ways that you need to be, like probably with the podcast. All right, how do you get more views? There's thousands of millions of podcasts. Like how do you promote it? Like what is the language? Are you paying for advertising? Are you submitting it here? Are you partnering with this person? And that's some of the I'm about to start running a giveaway on Instagram and Facebook for a hotel stay, a bunch of restaurants and businesses in Jacksonville. And a lot of that is, again, it's to help the local businesses, of course, but it's indirectly, it helps my readership. And, it's a constantly learning, something that I don't inherently know. Writing, I could write all day long, but it's other stuff that it's important to learn. And it comes back to the business aspect of, even though you're creative and you're a writer or you're making video, you always have to come back to, all right, there's still reality that I have to monetize this to support my lifestyle to continue doing that. And it's a hard thing for someone that's an artist to, I don't need to do that. Well, you kind of do, as much as you might fight it. I mean, I fight it sometimes, so.
How does was your book self-published?
Yeah. So
remember? How does that fit in? Self-publishing.
When it was kind of a bad time. It was during the recession, in 2009, when I was trying to, and it was looked at by a few major agencies and publications. They were interested, and then honestly, a lot of the people got laid off, and it was just really unlucky. And I was also 22, 23 years old. I didn't really know what I was doing. And then that stuff in undergrad.
I have a creative writing undergrad degree as well. I did not learn any of that stuff.
I don't remember what, and I remember even emailing some of my professors who are pretty decently published authors, and they couldn't even direct. It was all right, here you go. Go out into the world.
Good luck.
I know. Good luck. So I ended up just having it printed, and it was debuted as a book fair that was had a pretty good showing, and I've since realistically I probably have had about 10,000 people read it, which is pretty good for. And people pass it along, and I'll get emails from people in Australia, hey, I came across your book, and this is what I thought of it. And it's great, right? It's just about connecting with people and reaching new audiences. but it was a lot of learning. It was, I almost, I don't ever want to go through that experience again, but I almost wish that it was now with everything I've already learned, and that I'm 31 and I have, I'm a little bit more business minded. Just because I do think I would approach it differently. But at the same time, I don't regret it. And it's still done, in terms of, readership, it's done decently well. But there's still a lot of room to grow.
There are a lot of books that never get 10,000 readers.
I mean, I think a lot of it is, my family has very deep roots in Michigan, Detroit suburbs, and, everyone knew what happened, but not really. And so I think, everyone knew my sister died, everyone knew this, everyone knew that, but there was a lot of the story that, they didn't understand, or, my sister was bipolar. And so that's a lot of the discussion in the book. People very quickly wrote it off as like, oh, she was bipolar, that's why she killed herself. Like, no, like, not at all. She was very centered. Her husband, whatever you want to call him, his ex-girlfriend even came up to her, said her memorial service, and said, if I had married him, I would have killed myself too. And, it was just the way that he was. So there was a lot of support in Michigan. If you're deeply rooted in the community, people build each other up and they pass it along. And there's a lot of learning involved in that book, understanding. So I just think it was kind of a natural, kind of like domino effect, which is great, but it could be more, so, there's a lot of things that I'm working on just to get that message out, especially with how prevalent suicide is becoming, especially in like high school.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat recently that there's the most growth in terms of like demographics is girls 8 to 15 right now is the highest. It may not be the highest level overall, but it's spiked recently. And there's a lot of discussion over like cyberbullying and online stuff. And
I will say that, and this is something that I wrote a blog, this was months ago, and I can't even remember what triggered the conversation, but there's this thing called the contagion effect, right? And it's something that I experienced, like, never once thought about suicide until my sister died. And then all of a sudden, because it becomes an option, it becomes part of your vocabulary. And it's like, oh, I'm really sad, I'll just kill myself. I just want to die. And as opposed to before she did that, I just didn't know it was possible. It'd be like, like, I don't even know. Like, we can't fly, right? And then all of a sudden someone shows you how to do it and you're like, oh my God, like, that's an option. And it could be anything, and, positive or negative. And I think that's truly my belief, is that that's what's happening, and why it's becoming so prevalent is because even if we present it to kids, like, this is a terrible thing, don't do this, it's in their face and they're learning about it and they're seeing. And so they're associating their sad feelings and they're, being bullied, or, however they're upset and whatever's triggering these emotions, as this is the way to fix it. Because I saw 10 other people, or I saw on the news, or I saw on social media, or whatever it is, and it becomes almost acceptable. Terrible. And that's where, like, the internet's an amazing thing, and it's really powerful to, to spread knowledge and to connect. But in many ways, it has that negative effect of, shit, like, the only reason these kids probably know about this, unless it personally happened within their family, is because they saw a Netflix special on 13, or they heard about, some kid 5 counties over because they read a newspaper, and all of a sudden it becomes this like telephone effect. Like, oh, did you hear about this? Oh, you hear about this? And it becomes part of their psyche. My high school, my alma mater back in Michigan, I'm waiting to, they had a death, a senior, the morning of prom, who was like very social. I don't even know the kid. I was just talking to the president of the school, and like the last kid you would have thought would have killed himself, and did it the morning of prom. And they're setting up the fall to have like open discussion and assemblies, and I'm hoping that come in and talk to the students. But again, it like makes my heart break because I know firsthand what it does to someone. And not just, and not just to the person, right? It's everyone. It's the parents, it's the siblings, it's the best friends, it's the school,
That's so interesting because growing up, I don't know if I went to school in Prescott, Arizona, and I actually have my yearbooks over there. A little while ago, I was working on something and I was looking for names. I'm trying to do fiction myself. And we had a suicide every year, at least one every year. Like, I can't think of a time when it wasn't in my vocabulary. And also, I grew up in in a domestic violence abuse situation as a child, experiencing it, and it hovered nearby a lot. So I think it does depend on your experience, but I thought of it a lot as a child and not as an adult. Like as an adult, having my own feeling in control of my own life has been so important, probably because I felt so out of control of my life then. And I did see examples one girl even brought a gun to school and killed herself in the bathroom at school. And one of my classmates found her. And
see, that's interesting that you said that, because now that I think about it, there was a kid in my college on the other side of my dormitory that hung himself in his closet, and it was upsetting. I didn't know him, and honestly, I remember being like, oh wow, that's terrible, and then I just went about my day. And until it was like personally affected me, I just didn't really understand the heaviness of it. I guess, and even then it was around me to some extent, and I would see it in movies. But that's interesting that you say that, because I never even thought about that experience until right now.
Something that was so interesting. Do you remember the movie Heathers? I think you're younger than I am.
Why does that sound so familiar?
It's a movie. There are three girls named Heather in the movie. It has Winona Ryder and who is the guy?
I can picture almost like a scene, or like it being played on like TNT or something, where but I could not tell you even what it's about.
Well, it's a super dark comedy, and in it, the new kid comes from somewhere else, and you don't know that much about him at first. But he and one of the three Heathers end up kind of like being together, and it's a dark comedy, so you're kind of laughing as they're setting these things up, but they end up killing several classmates and making it look like suicide. And then at the very end, he is trying to blow up the entire school, and she ends up stopping him from blowing up the school, but he has explosives strapped to his body, and he walks off, and she ends up lighting a cigarette, like putting a cigarette in her mouth, and when he explodes, it lights a cigarette. So it's her letting him go. And there was all this kind of messed up stuff anyways, like his father was an explosives expert, and that his mother had died in one of the buildings that he was demolishing. So it's all this very, very dark stuff. But this was before Columbine, and it was before anyone actually killed lots of, there hadn't been an event that go off at a gun in and shoot a bunch of classmates. And I remember really liking that movie as a...
Oh, did I lose you?
Oh, whoops, we went, you're frozen to me. Hang on a sec, let's see. Okay.
Can you hear me, Jen?
I can hear you.
Uh-oh.
We'll have to see how this turns out. We might have to edit out a bit for frozenness.
Jen, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, it looks like we're back. Okay, we'll just edit that bit out if we can.
That's okay. Yeah, now I need to go watch that film.
Well, I was really struck by back then, like angsty teenagers thought it was a funny movie. And then once it became a reality, once those things happened, like I wonder what the experience would be like watching that movie now. Like if my kids watched that movie with Columbine and everything behind us all, Sandy Hook, all of these horrible school events, I don't think it would be funny anymore at all. But it was back then.
Banned from like children seeing it.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody watches it anymore, but it just popped into my head then as I remember in high school watching it and me and my other angsty friends just being like, yeah, everyone dreams about blowing up the school, don't they? Everyone hates school, right? You know, they want everyone at school to die.
Yeah.
But no, we don't really, you know,
And
yeah,
hadn't been, again, it goes back to that wasn't your reality yet. And so
yeah,
now, because that is what kids are doing, it's like, oh shoot, like this is actually something that can happen and does happen, and I could do it and you could do it, and it creates this like distrust almost. And that's, I think, what like the line message is it's, you know, you don't know what someone else is going to do. You only are in control of yourself and your emotions and your thoughts and your actions. And even though it like could be your best friend, there's so much that, you know, it's, I just feel like we're always like almost encouraged not to be open. As much as people say, oh, be open, when you are open, people are like, oh, we don't really want to hear that.
mm,
And so you never really know what people are thinking, and then take it into like a school environment, you foster that kind of dynamic, and then all of a sudden it just like literally could explode, where a kid takes it to that level. And it's just, I don't know, I don't have kids yet, and like the thought of like my kid being in one of those environments is just like, it like kills me. You know, I have niece and nephew, and it just, I don't know. I mean, I didn't mean for this discussion to be so heavy. It's just, you know, it is what it is. And it's something that, you know, and you can still talk about it and like, you know, try to make light of it as best you can, but it's real, you know? So,
mm-hmm.
but now I need to look into that movie.
Yeah. Well, and I have two daughters, one of whom significantly affected by autism. And, you know, I feel like everything that makes us different, like for me, it was the abuse made me really different in school. And I hid that. I didn't want anyone to know. I thought it made me dirty and gross and evil. And like, if anybody knew,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't even like, I mean, we did when I went away to college, we did eventually prosecute and he's in jail and everything. But I just felt like the reflection on me was so, I thought nobody would ever want someone who's been through
And
this, you know?
the truth is that if people knew, they would have been probably so empathetic and understood a lot of your actions, which you might not have even realized you were doing, because it was like your almost like your way to like survive and protect yourself. And it's just, again, it goes to like, how can we be more open, that if something is going on or something that not making you comfortable or something you don't feel good about, instead of like that sense of like, I have to hide it to make myself feel or be presented as more together. You know, it's just like that sense of realness that like, yeah, I feel for you. I mean, that was not my reality. I had a really beautiful childhood, despite a lot of like ups and downs with my sister and like things that, you know, I went through or my parents went through or whatever, but for like the most part. But I know friends that, you know, were in a you know, household with, you know, two alcoholic parents, and she would sleep at my house every night in the summer to escape. And I didn't even realize at the time, you know, she didn't really talk about it. And it like breaks my heart to think like that would be your home environment.
Thank goodness you were there to help. I mean, what if she hadn't had your house to go to? Would
Yeah.
she have ended up sleeping rough or going on the street or, you know? Yeah. Yeah, but with my daughter, my worry is just as she gets older, the separation between her and the kids her own age has widened.
Yeah.
And I know that's hard. So, I mean, we always try to think about what we can do to improve her quality of life, even though it is significantly different than other kids her age. But yeah, those stats too, like kids with ADHD and autism, they have higher rates as well.
But then the like the positive way to look at that is, could you imagine 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where they don't understand what's going on and other kids aren't even, you know, sensitive to that? Now it is presented as like, hey, they, you know, it's almost like instead of blue eyes, they have brown eyes, and like they're just like you. And it's just how we talk about it and make it the norm. Like,
Yeah.
they're just slightly different, and because they express them in this way doesn't mean that they're wrong. And it's from like a young age where you talk about it. It's with anything, right? But trust me, I would feel the same like sense of like anxiety and angst of, will they be okay?
Though I do feel like mental health issues are still hard for our society to deal with, and not instantly be like you were saying with your sister, oh, she was bipolar, so obviously, bipolar people just kill themselves, or people who have this different, and it pushes it away so it doesn't feel as close to you, people who can say that. And I know this has come up a few times with some of these mass shootings that we've seen. I'm always terrified as soon as it happens, because several times people have been like, oh, they had autism, they were autistic. They didn't have any sympathies for other human beings. They're, autistics are sociopaths, obviously. My daughter is the most loving, cuddly, sweetest person in the world.
It's almost the opposite. They're so sensitive and they're so loving. And it's just a lack of understanding and like proper information of who these people. I mean, I have, there's I live in like a little tiny like condo complex back in San Diego, and one of a couple that own, they're not crazy, but they're really difficult. And one of my neighbors will say like, oh, she's bipolar. And I'm like, she's not bipolar. She doesn't have ups and downs like that. She's not logical a lot of times, and she can be explosive, and she has an anger issue. That's not bipolar. Oh, she's bipolar. She goes on, and I'm like, no, like, and it's those little different conversations you have with people. Like, oh, she's bipolar. Don't be bipolar. I'm like, that's not bipolar. And even if she was, it'd be okay. And, it's not like, we're so quick to label. Mm-hmm. And, you have to, everyone wants to just understand their place in the world and set everyone aside. Like, they want to understand what their placement is. And so if they were to say, oh, my sister killed herself because she was bipolar, and then it makes sense in their head, and they go, okay, done.
Yeah, I don't have to think about anything else.
Think about it. And so if it's an autistic kid that blew up a building, oh, it's because he's autistic. Done. It's like, no. Like, it's individuals. Like, I'm just like you. You're just like me. There's different, obviously like chemical reactions that are going on differently, but it's so much more. And I totally agree with you. The mental illness, I actually wrote a blog post about this maybe like 6 months ago. Never really thought about it until there's so much mental illness on my mom's side of the family. And even like, on my dad's side with depression and stuff. And on my mom's side, like my grandma's narcissistic and Maya was bipolar and this and that, and this aunt killed herself and all these things. That I truly, when I was like 20 years old, 19, I was like waiting for the day that like I would find out I was schizophrenic. And the fear that I would have of like, I just would have a lot of like noise in my head if I was like, going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and it was anxiety. That's all it was. And then I talk about, if I was bipolar, that would be wrong. But it's totally okay that my sister's bipolar. And it's like understanding someone else, but like myself not being okay with that. And it goes back to, people just don't understand mental illness, aren't accepting of it because they're fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And, it like saddens me because it's usually the go-to excuse, and it's terrible.
And I think we're afraid too of the history of how we've treated people with mental illness. I do have a cousin with schizophrenia. My family's kind of similar. We have a lot of neurological disorder. There's epilepsy, autism. We have a number, like once I went to the autism center and they started doing our genetic questionnaires, because we participated in the genetic project. So they're trying to like map out autism and how it works. And there's a real tight comorbidity with other things like depression and schizophrenia. And I was like, oh my, because they say that it clusters in families. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's my family. We're so clustered. But like with schizophrenia, just the idea that other people will feel like you're completely out of control all the time, or that you get some independence taken away from you, and people assume that what you're doing is based on your illness, which may be true some of the times, but may not always be true too. Okay. So I know as I learned more and more about my family and some of the issues that different people have had, as a teenager, I remember having a fear of that, of losing control of my own mental state and being put somewhere.
Yeah.
I already felt trapped in the home I was in. That seemed really hard to escape. So the idea of like being put away. Yeah. And now having a child who very likely will not be independent. I mean, for our lifetime, that's fine. Like Tallulah living with us for the rest of our lives sounds great. My worry is what happens then. She has a little sister, but I also know families where like when a sibling is fully responsible their entire life for another sibling, that's a lot to lay on a kid to be like, and when mommy and daddy are gone, you're going to take care of your sister for the rest of your life. That's a hard thing too.
Yeah. We were just at dinner last night. And I was looking over at this table, and this is something that, for whatever reason, I haven't really been around that many people in wheelchairs or like physical disabilities. And I thought actually she was a young girl. And then when they were leaving, I realized she was probably like 20 years old, but her body had never really developed due to very small, her arms weren't fully functional. I mean, she was moving around in her wheelchair, but it's that if I had one-on-one experience with her and talked to her just like a person and could talk to her about limitations. Yeah, that's the thing. Limitations. And then I could understand, instead of an arm that could do this, it does this. And okay, what's the difference? It's like that idea of like, if I touch out and can reach you and feel you and understand you, then that fear of difference dissipates.
Yeah.
And I thought about that when I was sitting there, and yes, don't get me wrong, like I still had that thought of like, wow, that'd be so challenging. But I have my own challenges. And so I kind of have to check myself sometimes of like, all right, like that's her reality and that's her challenge. And maybe she wouldn't want, a history of mental illness. And again, it just goes back to until you can understand someone else and really live that life, we hold on to that fear and like that difference. And then we just manifest it in almost disdain for someone or something different. Same thing with mental illness. It could be physical ailments. It could be mental illness. It could be this, it could be that. But it's,
I think it all comes down to fear though, like
it's all fear.
Being afraid of that happening to you in some way, or you being disabled, or that's something that always gets me too when debates come up, like because we're in the disabled community, we get all the news on what's going on legislatively for disabled people and educationally for disabled people. And right now is a really terrifying time in terms of Medicaid, because my daughter also has a white blood cell disorder. She's tube fed. She's severely allergic to most foods. She has a lot of stuff going on. And looking at, there have been suggestions that special needs kids be removed from classrooms again. I feel like we've worked so hard to bring special needs kids into the class. Like when I was a kid, I'm 41, so I'm a decade ahead of you. They were always relegated. There was like a special needs area of the school, usually at the back of the school, to let the wheelchairs in, right? So it doesn't like clog up but really it just kept the special needs kids out of sight and out of mind from everybody else. And they didn't interact much, which meant all the kids going through school didn't have the experience of sitting and talking to the girl in the wheelchair and finding out what her life's like, and that she loves ponies and she loves princesses, or, whatever it is. So when I saw this article about Betsy DeVos and these ideas that integrating the kids means that the kids who really could be getting ahead aren't getting attention from the teacher because the teacher is having to pay more attention to the special needs kids in the class, and how unfair that is on all these other kids. It was really frightening and upsetting, because it's like if kids get used to seeing special needs kids and kids with ADHD or schizophrenia, or kids who have other struggles, other neurological otherness on a daily basis, it won't be frightening. They'll be like, oh, that's just like my friend Timmy at school, or that's just like Lucy or whoever. And the idea of going back to relegating them to the back of the school, the back of the bus, it's upsetting.
I mean, this is like 6-7 years ago now, maybe 6 years ago. I was in school, did grad school in Chicago, and the last semester, just because I needed some distraction from writing my thesis, I was helping run an after-school program at an elementary, like maybe a mile from my apartment. And there were kids all over I mean, I had a couple autistic children. I mean, it was by far the most challenging job I've ever done. I was in charge of like at days, like the highest, like 60 kids. I had a couple staff. I mean, there was a lot of emotional issues, physical, like it was, a lot of the kids were really easy. A lot of the I mean, chairs thrown, like like it was like, would make myself sick over the stress. But I would see when I would come into, in to prepare for the afternoon session, they had the special needs kid in one room all together, one kid banging his head against the floor, like frustration. He just didn't know how to present his emotions yet. And it was completely separate from the other kids. And it broke my heart because, again, yeah, all you're doing is making them, and us. And, I could.
Those kids need friends too. They need.
I know. And I could see how a parent with a child that doesn't have those type of special needs, their kids might need something else, but it's not necessarily as like, physically fearful or right in your face. I could see how they'd be like, no, but I don't want my kid to be disadvantaged. But it's like taking a step back and realizing that it's like a bigger issue. And
We're a society. We're
exactly. And
together.
Yeah.
Especially people who are anti.
For a second.
Oh no, we're losing it again. Okay. Oh, there we go. So I think people who are anti taking care of people who have difficulties or disadvantage, people who don't want to be paying for Medicaid or don't want to be paying for these different things, forget that they could slip in the shower and be a quadriplegic. Like any day any of us, we could have a traumatic brain injury from a car accident. Exactly. It can happen to any of us any moment. So this idea of like relegating people away and separating and isolating is so difficult. But I wanted to bring up one more thing before we wrap up, which was
a tangent.
I know we've got on a very long one, but I noticed you were involved with the Living Witness to Holocaust Survivor series. Can you tell me some about that as well?
Yeah. So simultaneously, while I was writing Must Girls Love, the memoir about my sister, I started in on this project. My mom's a really, really talented portrait photographer, and collaborated where the first series, the first set of books was Detroit area survivors. So I think there were 92 Holocaust survivors included in that book. And then about a year and a half later, we started on the international version, which I think was either 7 or 8 countries, just over 300 survivors. And the whole series, it's a coffee table style book, and it's like a work of art. It's a photograph, it's a photograph of a survivor, like a portrait that my mom took, and then I'll write like a bio blurb. And it might be, 2 sentences because the survivor did not want to talk at all. It could have been a whole a whole page where I typically focused on like one aspect, whether they're an architect and why they got into architecture, or, it could have been, the experience of saying goodbye to their father in Auschwitz and why they still at 85 years old still sleep every night with a stuffed animal because their father gave them a stuffed animal. And it's, but it was a very intense book series. It was very emotionally draining, but a lot of the survivors have passed, and it's just kind of like commemorating their experiences, again, with the understanding that we can connect with someone that it seems so far removed. If I can read a story and I can look at someone's face and say, wow, like this was their experience, I need to be more empathetic toward that, whether it's Jews or Arabs or Syrians or whatever it is, it's different. And those books were, we had them published through a publishing house in Canada. My mom's photography studio distributes them, somewhat, and we were in a bunch of book fairs and in some publications and stuff. But the intention in either the Living Witnesses books or Must Girls Love was one and the same. How can I share my story, or how can I share someone else's story so we can understand and connect? But again, I didn't make, that was full on, like we started a nonprofit, 501c3, it's called A Dime and a Penny. I did not get paid for that. You know, it was a whole project that I was doing just because it's really important. So it goes back to like the financial part of like, you know, that's why I work with companies one-on-one, even though I love doing it. That's, you know, you have to still find something that sustains you. But the Living Witnesses was a really, really powerful project. You know, my mom is still very, very close to a lot of the survivors, or will, you know, go to their funerals or fly to London for someone's funeral, or so it's, you know, there was a whole team of us. You know, her assistant kind of was the producer of the book, Linda, and did a lot of the interviewing, and then like send me voice recordings from Europe, and it was a very involved process. But you know, definitely a part of my history as a writer for sure.
Does your family have some direct connection to?
I'm Jewish. I'm not religious, but you know, both sides of my family were Jewish. Both sides came over like right after World War I. Neither were in the Holocaust. The reason that we kind of started to get involved was, in many ways, it acted as a distraction for my mom after Maya died, and to also just be around people that have experienced tremendous loss. Someone that she could relate to, right? Understanding. And someone had asked her, hey, can you photograph some of these survivors? And it was going to be in like a very specific, she's like, no, but you know, I'll take their portraits like outside in my studio, the way that she photographs. And then it just kind of blossomed into a book, and it just kind of happened. And me being the writer, and you know, it was challenging, you know, I mean, those were a pretty hard couple of years, and working my mom was great, but you know, the reality was like, you know, we were dealing also with grief on our own, you know, in our own lives. But yeah, it was not a, you know, because my grandfather was a survivor of Auschwitz or something. We had the Jewish connection in Detroit, and then we just kept kind of going with it. Because it is a really important, you know, a lot of these people are dying. Like, they just are. They're in their 90s, some in their hundreds. There was a woman, the oldest living Holocaust survivor, Alice, passed away maybe a year ago, 2 years. I've lost track of time. She was 107.
Wow.
She had seen a lot. And
Yeah.
to share her story and document it is really important, really valuable. So, but that's what the Living Witnesses is. Yep.
Okay, well, that sounds like an amazing project too. Are you working on a new book of any kind now?
So I was, I picked at this book for like about 5 years now, 6 years, and I kind of revisited it about a year ago. Started, you know, passing it around to some people, a couple agencies in LA, and I kind of, it's all about like dating and love, and seeking love and experience and whatnot, and a lot of humor, very different vibe from my other books, not very heavy. And you know, just a lot of humor in it, but realness. And I kind of stepped back from that because I've been focused so much on building my blog and my readership, and you know, focusing a little bit much more on the travel aspect. But that is something I might end up just, I mean, you know, right now I might end up just publishing on Amazon as like an ebook, and then eventually kind of shop it around. You know, it's beneficial sometimes to have a publisher, to work with an agent, but the way that it really works these days is it's still a lot on the writer, on the author, to do a lot of the work.
Yeah.
Understand how the industry works unless you're like in it. So there's a lot you can do with self-publishing. It's just, you know, it's just distributing it in the best way. But I'm working on that. I think my biggest project right now is, you know, I'm just adding, I've traveled a decent amount in my life, and just trying to really expose people to, you know, the message. I'm always kind of like, my overarching message always is like, how can you live as happy as possible and have as much fun? Because after, you know, after that kind of loss, and I don't know if you feel the same, you know, after your background, you know, as a child, it's my whole intention in life is like, how can I be happy and feel good? I never want to feel how I did when I was 22, 23, 24, ever. If I can avoid that, and I that is my intention every day. So it's, yeah, I mean, that's, you know, and whether it's working on, you know, a book about dating and love, or working on, you know, more travel guides, so visiting different cities in the U.S. or countries, you know, internationally. it's always with that, like, how can I inspire someone to go and do whatever they're passionate about? So, yeah.
Well, that's great. That's a good message to share. Well, and we'll make sure to share your links in the show notes too for your book and your blog and everything.
And I'm
But thank you. Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna add this to, I have a page where, like, I'll on my website with, like, media links and whatnot. So I'll give you guys a backlink and share it on my Instagram and stuff.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me and being so open and transparent and vulnerable on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.